How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Pei Daled, Daf 84 of Masechta Chullin. Friends, Daf 84 is an interesting daf. I think it might end up being a long one, but I guess we'll find out. Anyways, 4 sections on Daf 84 of Masechta Chullin. The first one is Kisui hadam for kodashim. This is the sugi that we began yesterday. The Mishnah had said, the first Mishnah in Perek, Kisui hadam, had said, Bechulin avalo b'mukdashin. That Kisui hadam, after you shecht a chaya or an oaf, the covering the blood in dirt, right? Some dirt on the floor, blood in the dirt on top of the blood. It applies to chulin for non-sanctified animals, but not for mukdashin. We began the discussion yesterday. We are going to continue it and complete it today. After that, we discussed Kisui hadam for beheimahs. Okay, small little sugya, although there is a interesting halacha about mikvaos, sort of buried in there a little bit. We'll see how far we get into that. Then we discuss perspectives towards meat consumption. Very, very, very interesting sugya, in my opinion. The Gemara gives a perspective on how we should think about eating meat. Should we have meat 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Should we have meat on special occasions? So the Gemara will give some varied opinions on that question. And finally, Kisui hadam on Shabbis. Let's say there's a chole sheyesh bo sakana. If there's somebody who's very, very, very ill and they need meat, you are allowed to slaughter an animal for that ill person, which I believe we even learned about on Daf Tesvav of Masechta Chullin. The interesting question is, what if you shecht a deer for somebody on Shabbos? What about Kisui hadam? Do you do it? Don't you do it? Friends, this is what we have in store on Daf Pei Daled of Masechta Chullin. Come, join me. Let's have a great time learning Masechta Chullin after Tisha B'Av, of course, or even on Tisha B'Av in the Beis HaMikdash, even better. Friends, we begin. Daf Pei Gimel Amid Beis 2, 4, 5 lines from the bottom. V'ligrare v'lichase. So we are in the middle of addressing the question of the Mishnah had said, as I mentioned in the introduction, Bechulin avalo b'mukdashin, that Kisui hadam is for chulin animals, for lunch animals, for dinner animals, for breakfast animals. Although, as I mentioned in the introduction, also we're going to have perspectives on how much should we be consuming meat. But korbanos, however, there is no Kisui hadam by korbanos. For example, a chatas ha'of. A chatas ha'of is a bird. Birds require Kisui hadam. However, if one does as a chatas ha'of and its blood is pressed against the mizbeach and sprinkled on the mizbeach, as we learned all about in Masechta Zvachim. So we said yesterday that there is no Kisui hadam. Why is there no Kisui hadam? Did we say yesterday? Because it's essentially impossible. You can't Kisui hadam. You have to put dirt below the blood and then cover the blood with dirt. So you have dirt, blood, dirt, and you can't put dirt on the mizbeach. Just whatever we talked about yesterday, why it wouldn't work. So essentially, and of course there are no chayas that are korbanos. So the only potential you would have is for bird offerings, and we said it's not shaykh for technical reasons. You can't do Kisui hadam. Now says the Gemara, frag the Gemara, you ever heard of a squeegee? V'ligrare v'lichase. Why don't you get the temple get the temple squeegee and squeegee the blood off of the mizbeach onto the floor of the azara, and there on the floor of the azara do Kisui hadam. Milotnan, after all, do we not learn in a Mishnah on Daf Pei Zayin of Masechta Chullin? Dam anitas, if you have blood, I actually want to skip to Daf Pei Zayin Amud Beis. I'm going to read from the Mishnah on Pei Zayin Amud Beis, just because there's an extra line that I want to share. So dam anitas, that if you have blood that spritzed, v'shala sakin, or blood that's on the knife, on the shechita knife, chayev l'chasas, you got to cover that blood. And I want to add this, which is not in our Gemara, but it's in the Mishnah. Rabbi says, when is this? Ein sham dam elahu, if that's the only blood of yesh sham dam shelo hu patim l'chasos. Meaning, when you shecht an animal, you don't have to find all the blood and cover all of it. If there's other blood, if there is primary blood that when you shechted the animal, right? So when you shechted the animal, there was already blood, and you covered that blood. So then, so you yotze the mitzvah. You don't have to now find the knife and wipe the blood off of the knife and cover that blood. But if there is no other blood for whatever reason, but there's still blood on the knife, or there's blood that spritzed, further out. So cover that blood. Okay, so back in our Gemara. So milotan, don't we add the Mishnah and that pezain domanitos, that any blood that spritzes away v'sha'ala sakin, or blood that's on the knife, chayiv l'chasos, you gotta cover that blood if you don't have any other blood to cover. So we see that you are wiping off the blood from the knife in that case, and then you're going to do kisui hadam with the blood that was wiped off to the knife. Let's say the zelbazachdu. Let's say the same thing over here. Nigror, let's squeegee. Let's get the temple squeegee, and we'll squeegee the blood off of the mizbeach. We'll do kisui hadam on the floor of the azorim. So, and for the Gemara, ibekachim mizbeach achinami. In terms of kodashim mizbeach, in terms of a chatas ha'of, in terms of a chatas ha'of, you could do it. Right? How does chatas ha'of work? You do malika, and then right by chatas ha'of, you don't decapitate it completely. You keep the head. Yeah, I think that's right. Olas ha'of, you decapitate it completely. By chatas ha'of, you don't decapitate it, and then you kind of press the bird, the kind of the neck against the wall, and you squeeze out his blood. You press the bird against, you press the blood against the wall, and then you sprinkle it. And so afterwards, take the temple squeegee and squeegee it down to the floor and do kisui hadam. So the ibu kachim is be'achachinam. Sure, you could do that with a chatas ha'of. The problem lies. Hachav ma'askinu b'kachei bedek habayis. The Mishnah is talking about kachei bedek habayis. If you donated, I imagine we could probably talk about a chicken. Why not? It just wouldn't be in the azor, right? So if you donate a chicken and you shecht that chicken, so the thing is that this is shchita she'ena re'uya, because since it's kodashim, right? Right here we say shchita she'ena re'uya lo shmei shchita, right? That's going to be the Mishnah on Daf Pehei, right? Right. Potum. So basically, because it's not going to be able to be eaten, right? So if you have, I think if you're makdish a chicken, I think that should work. If you're makdish a chicken to the bedek habayis, the temple upkeep. I don't know what the temple upkeep is going to do with the chicken. You're probably going to have to sell it, and then the money goes to temple upkeep. So if you have a chicken that you are makdish to the Beis Hamikdash, and then you slaughter the chicken, so the Mishnah is saying there's not going to be any kisui hadam, because since that chicken, you can't eat it. It's also ba'ano because it's hektish. So it's shchita she'ena re'uya. It's shchita she'ena re'uya because nobody can eat it. It's hektish. And as we learned in the Mishnah Daf Pehei, that when you have shchita she'ena re'uya, there's not going to be kisui hadam. So the Gemara says, look, if it comes to a chatas ha'of that the Kohanim are going to eat, Kohanim eat the chatas ha'of, so by the chatas ha'of, enechinam, you get the temple squeegee and you could do kisui hadam on the floor of the azar. But if you have if somebody who's makdish a chicken and it's hektish and you shech the chicken and the chicken, no, you can't eat it because it's also ba'ano, so then shchita she'ena re'uya, it's not fit, nobody can eat it, and that's part of from kisui hadam. So therefore the Mishnah is saying that in that case there's no kisui hadam. So but how about this? Why don't you be poted? So basically you shecht the chicken, and now you could be poted, transfer its value onto money. That money will become hektish. The bedek habayis, I'm sure, would prefer to get money than to get a chicken. To the temple upkeep with the chicken. Akoponim. So and now it'll be mutar ba'ano. So now do kisui hadam. Lifarkin will be poted the bedek habayis chicken, And v'chasinu do kisui hadam then. Well, there is an opinion when it comes to being poda hekdesh that it requires ha'amada ve'ha'arocha. You have to stand it up, and then the kohen takes a look at it and evaluates it. But here, the chicken can't stand up because it's gishturban. It is in chicken heaven. Ve'ha'arocha, fine, uchiman. Now, the thing is, here is the thing. Whose opinion would be this? We've essentially said two things so far. Thing number one that we said is shchita she'ena re'uya lo shmei shchita when it comes to kisui adam. When it comes to kisui adam, shchita re'uya, there's no kisui adam. That's principle number one. Principle number two is that kosher bedek habayis requires ha'amoda ve'ha'arocha. They have to stand up the chicken so that you can evaluate it, and that can't be done here. The thing is, if it's like Reb Meir, the Omar, the Hakol, Ayu B'chlal, Hamad V'Arocha. So if you're going to say it's like Reb Meir, that Reb Meir, whose opinion is that you have to do Hamad V'Arocha, you have to stand up. You have to stand up the animal so you can evaluate. And here you can't do that because it's already been shechted. The thing is, Ha'Omar, we know that Reb Meir's opinion when it comes to Shchita She'ena Re'uya, Shchita She'ena Re'uya Shma Shchita. Reb Meir says that Shchita She'ena Re'uya is Shchita, and therefore it would require Kisui hadam. Right? We saw in the previous parak, and also Vesbano, that Reb Shimon's Shita is that Shchita She'ena Re'uya lo Shma Shchita. And we're going to see on Daf Pehei in the Mishnah that it's the opinion of Reb Meir that Shchita She'ena Re'uya Shma Shchita, which was the opinion of the Rabbanan and also Vesbano. So now, this whole idea of bedek habayis was dependent on two things. Number one, shchita she'ena re'uya lo shmei shchita, which is why there's no kisui hadam by the kosher bedek habayis, because nobody can eat it. And then we also said, and you can't be podet because you have to stand it up to be podet. The thing is, who says that you have to stand it up to be podet? Reb Meir. Who says shchita she'ena re'uya lo shma shchita? Not Reb Meir. Reb Shimon. So Ikar Reb Shimon, and if we're saying like Reb Shimon, Da'amar Shchita She'ena Re'uya Lo Shma Shchita, so if we say, okay, fine, so kosher bedek habayis is like Reb Shimon, that Shchita She'ena Re'uya Lo Shmei Shchita, therefore there's no Kisui Adam, but Ha'amar Lo Ayu B'chlal Hamad V'Arocha, he says you don't have to stand it up to be podet, so why not just be podet and do Kisui Adam? So what's going on? So how do we make sense of all of this? How do we make sense of all of this, right? That Shchita She'ena Re'uya Lo Shmei Shchita, and we need Hamad V'Arocha. The first part is Reb Shimon's Shita, the second part is Reb Meir's Shita. Rav Yosef says, Rav Yosef, Rebbe he. Well, this is the Shita of Rebbe. Rebbe, in our Mitzvah, we say in the Mishnah, is Davka by Kosher Bedek Habayis. And we're saying that there's no Kisui Adam. And we're saying that there's no Kisui Adam because it's based on sort of this combination of opinions. Reb Shimon's opinion that Shchita She'ena Re'uya Lo Shma Shchita, and Reb Meir's opinion that Tzarech Hamada V'Arocha. And says of Yosef, look, this is not any one Tana's opinion. It's the opinion of Rebbe Yehuda Nasi, the editor of the Mishnayos. This was his opinion that he kind of merged the opinions of two of his Rebbeim. It's not purely Reb Meir's Shita, it's not purely Reb Shimon's Shita. Rather, when it comes to Shchita She'ena Re'uya Lo Shma Shchita, he took the opinion of Reb Meir. When it came to Hamada V'Arocha, he took the opinion. I'm sorry, by Shchita She'ena Re'uya, he took the opinion of Reb Shimon. When it came to Hamada V'Arocha, he took the opinion of Reb Meir, and that is the opinion that he brought forth. Rebbe made the halacha taking from both of his Rebbeim. Rebbe had many Rebbeim, among them Reb Meir and Reb Shimon, and he kind of made, as my grandfather would say, a moija. So Rav Yosef, Rebbe, look, this is the opinion of Rebbe, and what he did was, when he was editing the Mishnayos, v'nasiv la'aliba de Tanoi, and he made a combination opinion based on two Tanoim, b'shchita she'ena re'uya savila Reb Shimon, that when it comes to shchita she'ena re'uya by Kisui Adam, he holds like Reb Shimon, that it's lo shma shchita, and there's no kisui hadam. Be'amod avai roche, and when it comes to the requirement to stand it up in order to evaluate it, Savala Reb Meir, he accepted the view of Reb Meir. Okay, so this is the original opinion of Rebbe, which is a combination of the opinions of Reb Meir and Reb Shimon, and that is why by Kacher Bedek Habayis there is no Kisui Adam. V'bai Sema, alternatively, Kula Reb Shimon you could say it's entirely Reb Shimon. That Shchita She'ein Ruya Lo Shma Shchita, and therefore there's no Kisui Adam, so why not just be Podet? Because after all, Reb Shimon does not require Ha'amada Ve'ayracha, standing it up to evaluate it. So why not be Podet, the dead chicken, and then do Kisui Adam? The shiny ocha, it's different over here, the Amr Kra, because the pasuk says by Kisui Adam, V'shafach v'chisa. You spill the blood of the animal or the bird, and immediately you cover it up. Misha'enu mechusar ela shvicha v'chisui. This is talking about a chaya or an oaf that you spill its blood and immediately do Kisui Adam. Yotzazet, to the exclusion of the chicken of Bedek Habayis that we've been discussing, Shemechusar Shvicha Pediya V'chisui. By the chicken of Bedek Habayis, you have to insert an additional step, which is being poda it. That if you shecht a chicken of Bedek Habayis and you spill its blood, so we say Shchita She'ein Ruya Lo Shma Shchita, since you can't eat it right now. In order to be able to eat it, so you could do Kisui Adam, you first need to be podet, and only then can you do Kisui Adam. You're inserting an extra step, no extra steps. And that's why you could say it's entirely the Shita of Reb Shimon, and even so, he would say that there's no Kisui Adam because you can't actually be podet, because that is adding an extra step. V'hashta de'asis le'achi. And now that we've arrived at this point that we're analyzing the psukim, remember how we had said initially, sure, you can do Kisui Adam by chata sa'of, just get the temple squeegee. Now we are rescinding on that view. You could say that the Mishnah also is talking about kodashim mizbeach, about even a chata sa'of, because mi she'einu mechusar el shvicha dechisui, that Kisui Adam is by a chaya or an oaf, that all that is missing is shvicha and kisui yotzazet, to the exclusion of chata sa'of, shemuchusar shvicha greira v'chisui, that is lacking, spilling its blood, right, the chata sa'of, squeegeeing, and then Kisui Adam. Squeegeeing is not a step in the process of Kisui Adam. So therefore, we can now say that the Mishnah, when it says Bechulin avalo b'mukdashin, it excludes not just Kadshe Bedek Habayis, but also Kadshe Mizbeach Achata Sof as well. Marber Rav Ashi Omer says, Marber Rav Ashi Omer, the pasuk says Chaya O Of. The pasuk says that Kisui Adam is by Chayas and by Ofs. We're comparing Chayas and Ofs. Machaya Eina Kodesh, just like Chayas are not Kodesh, right? You can't bring a Chaya as a korban. There's no korban that's a deer. Korbanos are beheimahs. They're oxen, sheep, goats, as we know. So apov eno kodesh. We're also talking about birds that are not kodesh. Kisui Adam is for chulin birds. Imachaya shein b'mino kodesh. Apov shein b'mino kodesh. So just like by chayas, where there's Kisui Adam, it's by chayas that there is no example of a deer or of an ibex or of any of the other chayas that they are brought as korbanos. So let's say the same thing as birds. Those birds which there are no korbanos brought from them are shaykh to Kisui Adam. Otzi Torah of Neyona. But what about a Tor? What about a Ben Yona? A Tor and a Ben Yona can be korbanos. Chatas of, olas of, etc. So sheyesh b'minan kodesh. How do I read this? Of Shemino Kadesh, Otzi Torah V'Yona she'ein b'minan Kadesh. Yeah, I think that's where you stop, right? So let us suggest that just like by chayas, all of the chayas that are shaykh to Kisui Adam are chayas that cannot be brought as korbanos, because no chayas can be brought as korbanos. Let's also say that all of the oafs that are shaykh to Kisui Adam are oafs that cannot be brought as korbanos. To exclude a Tor and a Ben Yona, a turtle dove and a young dove, that they are brought as korbanos, maybe they don't require Kisui Adam. Lo No, kichaya machaya lo chalakta bo af lo tachlok bo. No, rather we compare oafs to chayas in that, just like by chayas, all chayas are shaykh to kisui adam. Also by birds, all chayas are, just like by birds, all birds are shaykh to kisui adam. Just like by all chayas are shaykh to kisui adam, all birds are shaykh to kisui adam. Lo plug, there are no distinctions. Amazing. So where are we at right now? So where we have just wrapped up the sugya, right, where the Mishnah had said bechulin avalo b'mukdashin, that kisui adam applies to chulin but not to kodesh, and we investigated why that is so, and we have concluded that this is in fact the case, that there is no kisui adam by korbanos, not even using a squeegee. There's no kisui adam when it comes to korbanos, or really kodesh rather than korbanos, because as we said, we could even be talking about koche bedek habayis. Friends, now the Gemara is going to entertain the suggestion maybe there's kisui adam by beheimahs as well. Amar le Yaakov Minoah, Yaakov the Shmendrik, Yaakov the Min, the heretic, says L'Rava to Rava Kaimalon, Chai B'chlal Behema L'Siman. And after all, we know that a Chaya is a type of Behema when it comes to Simanim, when it comes to Kashrus, right? Of course, the Torah says that when it comes to Behemas, so there's the trachea and the esophagus. No, not that. When it comes to Behemas, there is the split hooves and the chewing of the cud. The same applies to chayas. So let's say the opposite as well. Ema nami behema bichlal chaya, as we learned about in, where did we learn? 10 daf ago, I believe. It was, behema makasha. I believe it was behema makasha. Where did we, let's see, does it say it over here? Yeah, what's this? Gimel. And daf nun tes, apparently, I guess. What was nun tes? Was it elu trefis? I guess so, right? So yeah, obviously it makes sense. So we learned in Elu Trepis that a chaya is a type of behema, but a behema is also a type of chaya. So let's say that just like chayas require kisui adam, maybe behemas, which are also types of chayas, maybe behemas also require kisui adam. That's the question. Doesn't seem so heretical, but anyways, that is the question that Yaakov the heretic asked Rava. Again, Kaimelon Chai B'chlal Behema L'Simonin, that a Chaya is included in behemas when it comes to chewing of the cud and splitting of the hooves. Ema Nami Behema B'chlal Chaya L'Kisui. Let's say that a behema is a type of Chaya, in that just like Chayas require Kisui Adam, behemas do as well. Amar Lei, to which Rava responds, Alech Amar Kra, we have a pasuk that says, I'm actually going to read the whole pasuk, not just what it says in the Gemara. The whole pasuk says, "Rak hadam lo sochelu." Don't eat the blood. Ala arz tishbechenu kamoyim. Rather, spill it on the floor like water. So we're comparing blood to water. So when the pasuk says, "Amrukra ala arz tishbechenu kamoyim," spill it on the water. Mamayim lo bai kisui. Just like when you spill blood on the water, you don't then do kisui adam, kisui amayim, right, so to speak. So af ai nami lo bai kisui. So also by blood, there's no kisui adam. What blood does not require kisui adam? That's like water. Well, it can't be talking about chayas. It can't be talking about ovs. It's talking about behemas. The blood of a behema does not require kisui adam. Elame ato yatbilu bo. Well, okay, if blood is so much like water, well then you should be able to go to the mikvah in blood. Ooh, okie dokie. So, okay, it'll be good for the mikvahs. They can have the hot mikvah, the cold mikvah, the warm mikvah, and the blood mikvah. So on my crow, the pasuk says, Ach mayon uvor mikveh mayim yiyeh tahor. That the pasuk says, Ach, only mayon uvor mikveh mayim will be tahor, hane in midachrine lo. That a spring and a mikvah of water. So if you go into a spring or into a mikvah of water, so then you are tahor. If you go into a mikvah of blood, you're going to remain tameh. only in springs and mikvahs of water, not in mikvahs of blood. But one second. When it says, only maybe that's to the exclusion of wine, honey, dew, things that aren't called water. However, blood that we're saying, we're comparing blood like water, maybe that is not excluded. Sorry for the double negative. Maybe it's included. Maybe just like you can use water, you can also use blood. After all, we compare blood to water. But blood, which apparently is called water, and therefore there's no Kisui hadam for beheimahs, maybe you can go to the mikvah in a blood mikvah. And for the Gemara, trei miute ksive. But in that pasuk of mayim uvor mikveh mayim yatar, there are two limitations, two limiting words. Mayon mayim, uvor mayim, right? It says mayon uvor mikveh mayim, so it's kilu as if mayim is going both on ma'ayan as well as on bor. Right? So trei miute ksive, mayon mayim, uvor mayim. So to exclude, so one of them is excluding sha'ar mashkin, like wine and dew, etc. And the second miut is to exclude even blood. Only water mikvahs are acceptable. Wait, maybe both miuts are saying it has to be water, right? We say mayon, mayim, bor, mayim. They have to be water. But maybe one of them is saying, yeah, water, not any of these other mashkin. Right? Meaning maybe both of them are these other mashkin, but not blood. Maybe blood, you can go into a mikvah of blood. Go to mikvah of water, go into mikvah of blood, no problem. When it says mayim twice, and it's a double exclusion, it's excluding two different types of the shar mashkin. Right? What are the shar mashkin? Let's see if we can remember them. We're talking about honey, we're talking about dew, wine, oil, and milk, I believe. So maybe when it says water twice, it's excluding those five, right? There are 7 mashkin, right? The 5 that we just listed, then of course water and blood. So there are 7 mashkin. So let's say, so the shar mashkin are those 5 that are not water or blood. That's the shar mashkin, at least in this context. So it says water, it has to be water, not the shar mashkin, not these other 5. And it says water twice, maybe it's to exclude the other 5 twice, each one in a separate context. So I'll say the mute shar mashkin. Maybe both times it says water, it's to exclude different types of these 5 mashkin. And when it says mayim one time, it's to exclude the shar mashkin that are zochalin. And the second time it says mayim, it's to exclude the shar mashkin that are michunasin. Michunasin is the easier one to understand, is a mikvah of wine, let's say. So it says mayim, it has to be water, a mikvah of water, not a mikvah of wine. If you have the wine in a mikvah, so it doesn't work. Okay, what's zochalin? Zochalin is a little bit of a trickier concept. Hopefully I can explain it. Hopefully, whatever. Here we go. This is what zochalin is. Basically, mayim she'uvin. What's mayim she'uvin? Well, a mikvah, right? If you have like a hole in the ground, a bor mikveh mayim, so you have a hole in the ground, and for that to be able to be tovel in the ground, in that mikveh, it's gonna have to be filled with rain water. It needs to be filled with rainwater. It rains and rains and rains. It gets filled up with rainwater as long as it's 40 sa'ah, which I thought was 500 liters, but I saw some other measurements that today were saying even 750 liters or even 950 liters. I don't know. Whatever it is, 40 sa'ah, anywhere between 500 and 1,000 liters apparently. Okay, so you let it rain and rain and rain. It fills up with rainwater. Now you have a mikvah of rainwater, and you can go to the mikvah in it. It needs 40 sa'ah of rain water. Now, if you have less than 40 sa'ah, let's say you have 30 sa'ah of rainwater, and then 3 logs. A log is about anywhere, since our range is so off, but it's anywhere between half a liter and a liter, I guess, right? So if you have 30 loaves, right? So each, oh boy. So if we said that, let's say we said a sa is 500 liters. So 30 sa, by 40 sa is 500 liters. So 30 sa is about, 28 liters, 30 liters, let's say. Like 280, 300 liters or something. And we're saying that a sa, a log is like, I don't know, a liter. So 3 liters. So you have basically 30 sa'ah, which we're saying is like, let's say, I don't know, 300 liters of rainwater. And then 3 liters of mayim she'uvin falls in, it passes the mikveh. The point is, it's not that much. It's like much less mayim she'uvin. What is mayim she'uvin? Mayim she'uvin is if you go to, let's say, a river, and you go with a bucket, and you go and you fill up some water with a bucket from the river. So you drew that water. You took that water yourself. That's mayim she'uvin. If you now walk up to your mikveh that is not yet a kosher mikveh, because a mikveh needs 40 sa'ah to be a kosher mikveh. It only has, in our example, 30 sa'ah. So it's not yet a kosher mikveh. You fill up a bucket of water from a river. That bucket now has mayim she'uvin in it. You go and dump it in your 30 sa'ah, which is, let's say 300 liters of, it's a machlok, so let's say 300 liters of, like 400 liters, let's call it 400 liters so you have 400 liters of rainwater. You take one bucket full of water that you drew from the river, which is now mayim she'uvin, and you dump it into the 400 liters of rainwater. You ruin the whole mikveh. It's done. It's ruined. 3 logs of mayim she'uvin are going to passel the whole mikveh. You got to start all over again. But what's fascinating, however, is that when we say that 3 logs of mayim she'uvin are going to be passel the mikveh, that specifically it's in a vessel. Again, we're talking about you had a bucket. You take a bucket, you pull it out of the river, and you dump the water from the bucket into the mikveh that you're constructing. You ruined the whole mikveh because you poured the mayim she'uvin from a vessel. That's why it ruined the mikveh. But listen to this. Again, in order for a mikveh to be kosher, it needs 40 sa'ah of rainwater. What if you have 21 sa'ah of rainwater? Or even the Rambam says 20 and a little bit more. Let's say 21 sa'ah of rainwater. And then you go to the river and you fill up a big basin with 19 sa'ah of water. But you filled it up from it's mayim she'uvin. You drew it from the river. It's mayim she'uvin. You had a big basin, 19 sa'ah. 19 sa'ah is, I don't know, 200 liters, 250 liters. I don't know. A lot of water. A lot of mayim she'uvin. And then it flows. That's what zochalin is. Finally, we're getting to what zochalin is. Zochalin is you have it flow. Maybe you create some kind of a ramp or something from the basin so that the mayim she'uvin now flows from this basin that you filled up with water from the river. It's mayim she'uvin, and you now have this like ramp of sorts, and the water is now flowing from the mayim she'uvin in to your mikveh that you're making. There were 21, so more than half of the way with rainwater. So of the 40 sa'ah required for the mikveh, you have 21 sa'ah of rainwater, and now the remaining 19 sa'ah to get to your 40 sa'ah are mayim she'uvin. But mayim she'uvin that you didn't dump in from a vessel, but that flowed in from this ramp from the basin that you made. That's what's called mayim she'uvin that are zochalin, and in that case, actually the mikveh is going to be tahor. It's going to be kosher. So when you had all of this rainwater, we said 30 sa'ah of rainwater, you take one bucket full of mayim she'uvin that you took from the river and you dump it in, you ruin the whole thing. But when you have 19 sa'ah, right, when you took, right, so one bucketful, which is like 3 loaves, right? 1 sa'ah is how many loaves? I don't know. It's 4 loaves in a kav and 6 kavs in a sa'ah. So it's 24 loaves per sa'ah, right? So it's 24 loaves per sa'ah. So then 4, right? So every 10 sa'ah is 240. So 40 sa'ah is 960 loaves. And you're just 3 loaves is going to pass the whole thing. You fill up some water, dump it in the mikveh, passes the whole thing. And yet, when you get 19 sa'ah, and you have it going down a ramp into the mikveh, it's completely fine. That's what's called mayim zochalin. Okay, sheesh. I hope it's okay that I got into that. It is. So what's the takeaway? The takeaway is that when we say that mayim, okay, here's some takeaways. When we say that mayim she'uvin is going to be possible in mikvah. First of all, it's only when it's not yet kosher. Once there's 40 sa'ah of rainwater in a mikvah, it's a kosher mikvah. You could dump it as much some mayim shuvim as you want. When there isn't yet 40 sa'ah of rainwater, if you take a vessel like a bucket and you dump in even just 3 loaves, a few liters of mayim shuvin, you ruin the whole mikvah. But if you have a big basin full of mayim shuvin and you flow it into the mikvah, you can even have just less than half of the mikvah be this mayim shuvin that you flowed in that way, and it is fine. And what we're saying is, so now back to our Gemara, when we say that the mashkin, when we say that so it says mayim twice, the Gemara suggests that both times, both mayims are to exclude these shar mashkim, these 5, one to exclude it, wine. You can't go to mikveh and wine when it's gathered together, a mikveh full of wine, or even right when it comes to mayim shuvim, which passes a mikveh, but if it flows in, it's kosher. Even if the wine is flowing in is flowing into the mikveh, still right, in both. And so maybe when it says mayim twice, it's to exclude shar mashkim when they're in a mikveh, like a mikveh full of it, and also to exclude shar mashkim when it's zochel and flowing in to the mikveh. So, and for the Gemara, the fact of the matter is, it says mayim 3 times, tlosim yutek sive, mayon mayim, uvor mayim, mikveh mayim, that the pasuk says, right, ach mayon, uvor, mikveh mayim, and mayim is referring to each of them. Mayon mayim, bor mayim, mikveh mayim. There are 3 mi'uts, and therefore it excludes all 3 things. It excludes shar mashkin when they're gathered in a mikveh. It excludes shar mashkin when they are zochalin into the mikveh, and it also excludes blood. You can't go to the mikveh in blood. But when it comes to beheimahs, if you shecht a beheimah, you don't need to do kisui hadam. Now the Gemara has a very interesting, in my opinion, discussion about different perspectives on eating meat. Let's see. Again, in my opinion, it's very interesting. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, asher yotzud, that by kisui hadam it says, V'ish ish, I'm reading the pasuk, B'nei Yisrael min ager gar b'sachim, asher yotzud tzeid chaya, that he hunts, he traps a chaya. Ein le'ela asher yotzud. So all I know is if you go out and hunt and trap a chaya, nitzodim v'omdim me'elein minayin, kigon avazim v'tanagolim. How do you know that there's even kisui adam when you have chayas and oafs that are already trapped? Maybe you raise your own chickens or something, so you already have your own chickens. You're not going out and trapping them per se. Got to catch them, but Talmud Lomar, I went to a chicken shchita like maybe a month ago or something. So my friend asked me to catch a chicken. I failed, but I'll get it next time. I was put on the spot. I didn't practice beforehand catching chickens. I'll get it next time. I'll get it next time. No, I went home. I watched some YouTube videos about how to catch a chicken, and I'll catch it next time. So anyways, so Talmud Lomar tzeid says asher yasud tzeid chaya. So tzeid means it's already, even it's already trapped. So mikol makom, even it's already trapped. Im kein ma Talmud Lomar asher yatsud. So then why does it say that you will trap it if it even applies to when it's already trapped? So limda Torah derech eretz. Because when it says yatsud, to trap, the Torah is teaching us derech eretz, the way that we should, the way of the land, the way that we should act. Shelo yochal adam baser ele bazman azos, that a person should only eat meat in this way, meaning with this perspective, with the perspective as though you had to go and trap your own meat. What does Rashi say? Rashi says, "Klomar lo yochal baser tadir." A person should not always be eating meat. Shelo ya'oni. Rashi says he shouldn't become poor, which is going to come up in the Gemara in a little bit, right? You shouldn't spend all your money on meat, but that it shouldn't just be that just every day you're running to the supermarket and filling up your cart with meat, and like the default is meat. There should be a perspective. Well, what if I had to trap this meat myself? There should be something special and a sort of instance of scarcity around meat consumption. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, yarchiv Hashem elekecha es gevulcha. I'm going to read the whole pasuk. Kasher diber lach. I'm reading from the pasuk. Ve'amarta ochla basar ki taive nafshecha lecha basar. You desire to eat meat. You'll eat meat when you have a desire for it. Again, the Torah teaches us how we should act. A person should eat meat when he has a desire for it, when he has a taiva for it. Again, it should not be that's the way I understand it. It shouldn't be the default that the default for breakfast could be I don't know what's a good alternative for breakfast. Cucumbers with trina, an apple and some cucumbers with trina. That's a good default for breakfast. To have steak for breakfast shouldn't be the default. Rather, right? So meaning the point is, it shouldn't just be the default that there's always meat around. Rather, when you have a desire, okay, I want meat. Okay, so then eat meat, but and then you'll go and you'll get meat. So should a person just go to the market, go to the butcher store, there's all the meat that you could possibly want, and just say, yeah, just give me a nice piece of freshly packaged meat, make it nice and clean. I don't want to see any blood or anything like that. Let me just roll, the shuk is right across the street from my house. Let me just hop over to the shuk, ask them just for some beautiful cuts of meat. Talmud the pasuk says, "V'zavachto mi bekarcho mitzoncha." No, you got to. Don't just go to the shuk and buy and have somebody else do all the preparation. You should prepare from your own. Shecht it yourself. Prepare it yourself. Again, there should be this perspective towards meat of kind of appreciation of a sort of sense of scarcity to it, an effort that goes into it. Yachol yizbach kol bikaro v'yochal kol sono v'yochal. Should you slaughter all of your cows and all of your sheep and goats and just eat all of your meat? Talmud omer mi bekarcha v'lo kol bekarcha mitzoncha v'lo kol tzoncha. Don't eat all the meat that you have. Eat some of it from it, not all of it. Now, Mikan Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, says Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Now, it's interesting. In this Gemara, the way I kind of viewed it, there's like three kind of layers to this Gemara. We just completed the way I'm looking at it. We completed layer one. Layer one was kind of like the more traditional, the more conservative approach. It was very conservative, right? Appreciate it. Should be like you have to hunt it. And only when you have a taiva for it, it shouldn't be the default. And don't just go to the shuk and buy. Like there should be a real appreciation of the effort, and there should be a sort of a scarcity around eating meat. Now things already now the cheshbon changes. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, "Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, misha yesh lo mana." It's about how much. It's about what you can afford. It's purely mathematics. That's really it. Look, if all you have is a mana, yikach lefiso litra yerek. So if all you have is a little bit of money. So eat vegetables. Asara mana, if you have 10 manas, yikach lefiso litra dagim. So buy a little fish. If you can afford fish, buy fish. Chamishim, if you have 50 manas, yikach lefiso litra basar. So get a little bit of meat. Mea mana, but already if you're a mamish, a millionaire, so yishav sulo kider b'chol yom, then you can have meat every single day. Ve'inach emas, and the others, when should they be eating? Right, we're saying if you're mamish a millionaire, so then you can have meat every single day. What about the other people? We said you can have fish, you can have meat, right? The people with 10 manas, 50 manas. So may have Shabbos, they have Shabbos. Every Shabbos they should have. So every Shabbos, on Shabbos that is enough. If you can afford it to have some fish, some meat on Shabbos, givaldik. Rab tzrichen anu lochash devezakin, and says Rab that we should that this is what we should do, like what Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says. So now already the cheshbon changes. It's about what you can afford. If you can afford it, eat meat every single day. If you can't afford it, eat vegetables. That's also fine. So it's not about all of a sudden, at least the way I'm seeing it, it's not about we're saying if you can afford it, if you're a millionaire, eat meat every single day. What about the scarcity? What about only when you have a taiva for it, not just by default every single day. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, it seems like he's making it more into just whatever you can afford, buy. Rabbi Yechanan says, Abba, of course, is a reference to Rav, who had said that we should do like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, this kind of cheshbon of what you can afford. Mi mishpachas briyim ava. Says Rabbi Yochanan, look, Rav came from a very healthy family, and for him, you could it's just a mathematical equation, just buy whatever you're afford. There's no health considerations. What if you need meat for health reasons? No, that's not part of the consideration. It says Rabbi Yochanan, because Rav comes from a healthy family, he didn't have to, consider, well, what's best for my health. He was purely considering, what can I afford? But we, says Rabbi Yochanan, if all you have is even a pruta, just, we gotta go to the store and buy whatever we need for our health. Amr of Nachman says, if Nachman could go to anu lovin va'ochlin. We even take out loans just so that we can, if we need meat, to take out meat, right? So Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Nachman are expecting that these were in earlier generations when the people were healthier, so they didn't necessarily need meat. They could just buy whatever they can afford or whatever it is. But we, in our generations, we're not as healthy as they are. And if we need meat, we have to buy meat. If we need this, we have to buy this. Whatever we can afford, we have to just stay alive. Right? We got to make sure we need to just avoid getting sick. And if we need to eat meat every day, we'll eat meat every day. And even if we can't afford it, we'll take out a loan in order to get it. So there were like three layers of this Gemara for me. Right? First, the Gemara started off like very conservative. Don't eat a lot of meat. On special occasions, eat meat. Don't just go to the shuk and buy meat. You should really appreciate what goes into eating meat. And then you have Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who's not so fussed about that. He's like, eat what you can afford. Then you have Rabbi Yochanan and Rav Nachman, who are saying that eating what you can afford doesn't take into considerations that, if all you're going to be eating is vegetables, maybe you're going to get sick. You have to eat whatever you can to stay alive, whatever is going to keep you from getting sick. And if that's meat, it's meat. And if it means you have to even take out a loan in order to eat the meat that you need in order to stay healthy, so do that as well. So kind of like towards the end, kind of all rules kind of went out. It's not what you can afford. It's not about scarcity. It's about trying to stay alive and doing whatever you can to survive. Kvasim levushecha, says the pasuk in Mishlei, sheep for your garments. Migez kvasim yeima bushecha, from the shearings of your sheep shall be your clothing. Umchir sade atudim. Le'olam yimkor adam sade v'yikach atudim. A person should sell his field in order to buy sheep, because from the sheep you'll have the wool for clothing, you'll have the milk for milk and cheese. V'yimkor adam atudim. Don't sell your sheep v'yikach sade in order to buy a field. V'dei chalev izim dayu la'adam sheispanes me chalev Gidoyim v'tloim shebesoch beso. Don't shecht your goats and your sheep. Keep them so that you have milk, and from the sheep you have wool. L'lachmecha l'lechem beisecha. Lachmecha. Let me just read that. Okay. Lachmecha kodem l'lechem beisecha. Your bread comes before the bread of your household. Interesting. V'chaim l'narasecha omer ma'zucha breder of Nachman. Tein chayim l'narasecha. Give life to your children. Mikan limdu Torah derecheretz. The Torah teaches from here, shelo yilamid adam es beno basar v'yayin. As Rashi says, livnei, at the last Rashi on the page, livnei beisecha limad darkei chayim. Teach them the ways of life. Listapik b'mzonos kalim. See if you can kind of get by to be able to eat lighter foods. You don't need meat and wine. Right, rather, right, ten chayim l'narasecha, give life, give the things that provide life to your youngins. They don't need heavy meat and heavy wines. Rav Yochanan, Rav Yochanan says, Reb Yochanan, haroitzashis asher, a person wants to become rich. You want to know what to do? Yasoik bebeimah, that's what you should do. Get sheep. Rav Chizda says, Rav Chizda, what does the pasuk mean? Ba'ashtaros sonecha. Shema ashros as bailein, that sheep make their owners rich. So with all this AI stuff, it's about sheep. It's not about AI. It's about sheep. Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan, kasa de charshin, prefer a cup from a machshefer, from a magician, velo kasa de potion, but not lukewarm water. But that's only in metal cups. There's no problem with lukewarm water in earthenware cups. And also when we're talking about metal cups, namilo amarin ella tulo shdibu tzivya. It's only if you didn't put in different grasses and herbs. Aval shdibu tzivya, put in different herbs, leis lanba, no problem. V'chilo shdibu tzivya namilo amarin ella tulo tzitz. Aval tzitz leis lanba. And also if there's no herbs in your metal cup of lukewarm water, if you had boiled it already and probably killed whatever is in there, so then it's also okay. Rabbi Yochanan says, a person who inherited a fortune, and he wants to squander it, yilbash klei pishtan, he will wear linen garments, and he will use glass vessels, and he will hire workers and not manage them. Yilbosh klei pishtan bechitana romisa. When we talk about the linen clothing, we're talking about Roman linen. I guess that was expensive, very fancy Roman linen. With white glass. I guess that was expensive, fancy glass. That's talking about oxen. If you hire workers to work with your oxen, and you're not going to supervise them and make sure that everything's going okay, well, you are going to lose. You're going to have to manage them properly. Otherwise, you will squander your fortune. Darash of Avira darshan zimnin omer la mishmei Rab Ami v'zimnin omer la mishmei Rab Asi. My dichsiv, what is it supposed to say? Tov ish chonen umalve, that it's a good for a man to lend. Yichalko dvarav ba mishpat. The olam yochal adam v'yishta pachos mima sheyeshlo. A person should always eat and drink a little bit less than what he has. Whatever he can afford, eat and drink a little bit below what you can afford. And in terms of how you present yourself and the clothing that you buy clothing equal to what you can afford. And in terms of honoring and providing for one's wife and for one's household, for one's children, there you should splurge, as my grandfather says, a little bit more than you can afford, because they're dependent on you. And he is dependent on the Rabbeinu Shalom. So therefore, provide a little bit extra for the people who are dependent on you. And I think the point is, trust that the Rabbeinu Shalom will provide a little bit extra for you. So that wraps up over here those different perspectives on meat consumption and how to think about eating and presenting oneself. And I think that was a very interesting section of Gemara over there. And now we have a very interesting Gemara about Kisui Adam on Shabbos. Darshan of Eina, a Pischa de Reish Gelusa. Of Eina Darshan by the entrance to the Reish Gelusa, the exilarch. And he was there by the entrance and he proclaimed that Shoichet l'choyle b'Shabbos chayiv l'chasos, a person who shechts for a choyle sheyesh bo sakana, a choyle who is dangerously ill, and they need to eat meat, and there is no available meat. So you shecht a deer that is there. So you shecht a deer that you had there, which you're allowed to do. Right? Choyle sheyesh bo sakana, he needs a deer, so you shecht a deer. The question is, what about Kisui Adam? It's Shabbos. You're also going to do the Kisui Adam. You just shechted a deer. Right? A Chai requires Kisui Adam. You're going to do it on Shabbos? So there's Eina, Piskel Deveres Gelusa, Hashoich L'chol B'Shabbos, Chayav L'chalos. Yup, you have a Chiyuv to do Kisui Adam. Amrlu Rabba objected, and he says, no, if you're going to shech this deer on Shabbos for Chol Sheish Bo Sakana, which is mutter, you won't do Kisui Adam. Ishtoma ka'omar. Rabba says that what Rav Eina said is fantastical. It's mind-boggling. Lishamtua le'amore mine. If I understood that correctly, we should tear out his tongue so that he shouldn't be able to say anything like this anymore. Apparently, Rabba really disagreed. Decided because we learned in a brisa. Rabbi Yossi says Rabbi Yossi. Koi. Okay. The animal that has recently come up so much, made such a splash on our Gemaras recently. The koi. Koi, of course, right? So ein shochatin oso be Yom Tov v'imshachto ein michasin as damo. So Rabbi Yossi says that a koi, this animal that we are uncertain if it is a beheimah, which does not require kisui hadam, or if it is a chaya that would require kisui hadam. So when it comes to a koi, we just avoid the whole question by not shechting it on Yom Tov. If it's Yom Tov, don't shecht a koi because if kisui hadam is a mess, we don't know what to do. V'imshachato, what if you did shecht a koi? Ein michasin as damo. We don't do kisui hadam for a suffix kisui hadam on Yom Tov. So what do we see right now? So we saw that Rav Eina is saying that when it comes to vadai kisui hadam, right, you shechted a deer on Shabbos. So we're saying Rav Eina wants to argue that vadai kisui hadam is doche even Shabbos, argues Rav Eina. Now, Rabbi Yossi is saying that a koi, which is suffix kisui hadam, we don't know if it's a beheimah or a chay, we don't know if it's chayiv in kisui hadam or not. So suffix kisui hadam, Rabbi Yossi is saying, don't do it, right? Don't check the koi, and if you do, don't do the kisui hadam. So suffix kisui hadam is not doche even Yom Tov, apparently. And now Rabbi Yossi says mikava chomer from the following kava chomer. Ma mila, when it comes to bris mila, she vada'a doche Shabbos. So when a baby is born on Shabbos, let's say 3 p.m. on a Shabbos, let's say. So if a baby is born on Shabbos, so the following Shabbos, Mila, so Mila Vada, when it's for sure was born last Shabbos, so then the following Shabbos, Mila is Doche, even Shabbos. However, Ein Sveika Doche, even Yom Tov. What if the baby was born a few hours later on Shabbos, Bein Hashmoshes, between sunset and nightfall? Safek Yom, Safek Laila, unsure if it was born on Shabbos or if it was born on Sunday. So you are not going to do the bris milah the following Shabbos, rather you're going to wait till Sunday. So when it's a safek whether the baby was born on Shabbos, so then it is not Toch Shabbos, you do it on Sunday. What if Sunday is Yom Tiv? So you wait till Monday. So by bris milah, what we see is that when it's vadai, when it's for sure the 8th day, so when it's vadai, it's doche even Shabbos. When it's a safek, it's not doche anything. Again, when it's a vadai, it's even doche Shabbos. When it's a safek, it's not doche anything. It's not even doche Yom Tov. So Kisui she'ein vada'o doche Shabbos, says Rabbi Yossi, when it comes to Kisui Adam, where the vadai is not doche Shabbos. This is the question that we're asking, that Rabbah is asking on Rav Eina, because what's the situation of vadai Kisui Adam that we're saying is not doche Shabbos? We're going to suggest in a few lines. We're not suggesting it yet, but we're going to suggest a little bit. This is essentially the question that Rabbah is asking Rav Eina. What's the situation of vadai Kisui Adam that we're saying is not doche Shabbos? Sounds like it's talking about when you shecht a chaya for a chole, and we're saying it's not doche Shabbos. You're not going to do Kisui Adam. So when it comes to Kisui Adam that is not doche Shabbos, then certainly it won't be doche Yom Tiv. Eino din she'ein sveko doche Yom Tiv, that it will not, that Kisui Adam is not doche Yom Tiv, and therefore, based on that Kal V'chomer from Bris Milah, Rabbi Yossi concludes that safek Kisui Adam, and therefore a koi, which is a safek beheimahs, safek chayes, safek if it has Kisui Adam or not, is not going to be doche Yom Tiv, and therefore don't check the koi on Yom Tiv, and if you do, you're not going to be doing Kisui Hadam. Amrulo, so now we see two responses to Rabbi Yossi's Kal V'chomer. First response, Amrulo Tkiyas Shofar b'gvulim tochiach. What about Tkiyas Shofar? She'ein vada'a doche Shabbos. It's a little bit tricky about what this vada and suffix is, but we're going to go with what we conclude. I'm just going to tell you right now. For now, I'm going to go with vada'a means a man, right? For men, right? Men, right? Tkiyas Shofar is mitzvah eseh she'ezman gromo. So therefore, anoshim chayavim v'noshim peturis. Men are chayavim in Tkiyas Shofar, and women are pituris for Tkiyah Shofar. We're going to see the Shita of Rabbi Yossi soon about that. About Koponim. So when it comes to a man blowing shofar on Rosh Hashanah, it is, even though he definitely has a chiyuv of shofar, he does not doche Shabbos, and yet a suffix, for example, a androgynous, right? He's got simani, right? He's got genitalia of a man and a woman. We don't know if is he a man or is he a woman. So he's a suffix man, and it is in fact doche Yom Tov, right? That an androgynous would blow shofar on Yom Tov, not on Shabbos, but so on Yom Tov. So we see by Tkiyah Shofar that Vadai Tkiyah Shofar is not doche Shabbos, but yet Safek is doche Yom Tov, right? So meaning the Kavachomer that Rabbi Yossi said was that Mila, when it's a Vadai, it's doche Shabbos. When it's a Safek, it's not doche anything. Therefore, Kisui Adam, which Vadai is not doche Shabbos. Therefore, certainly Safek will not be doche anything, will not be doche Yom Tov. Says the Gemara, Tkiyas Shofar is an example, however, that is Vadai is not doche Shabbos, but its Safek is doche Yom Tov. So maybe Safek Kisui Adam should be doche Yom Tov, even though Vadai is not doche Shabbos, but maybe Safek should be doche Yom Tov. Hey Shiv, right? So I was doing it again. So Amulos, so they said, Tkiyah Shofar b'gvulim tochiach. Let's bring a right from. Let's ask a question based on Tkiyah Shofar. She'ein v'adah doche Shabbos. That just like Kisui Adam, Vadai Tkiyah Shofar is not doche Shabbos. However, by Tkiyah Shofar, Sfeika doche Yom Tov. That in androgynous, a suffix is doche Yom Tov. So maybe Kisui Adam b'suffix should be doche Yom Tov, and maybe you would do Kisui Adam for a koi on Yom Tov. And next rebuttal, Hey Shiv Rabbi Elazar HaKaper Bribi Tshuva, that Rabbi Elazar HaKaper responded, Malemila shekain ein noeges b'leila yom tovim, tomer b'kisui shenoeg b'leila yom tovim. That the Kavachomer from which we learned that Safek Kisui Adam would not be doche Yom Tov, that Kavachomer was based on the premise that Mila is more stringent than Kisui Adam. But actually, upon analysis, you can argue that Kisui Adam is more stringent than Mila. How so? Well, a limitation of Mila is that it is not performed at night. Kisui Adam is performed even at night. The Gemara says, Leila Yom Tovim. Later on, we're going to... What's unique about Leila Yom Tovim? It's really any night. Anyways, so we're saying that... So you can actually argue that Kisui Adam is more stringent than Mila. And if that's the case, if Kisui Adam is more stringent, so you can make the argument that Safek Kisui Adam would be doche Yom Tov. Okay, fine. Babble says, Babble, Ze'echo min advarim. This was one of the instances, Sham Reb Chia, that said, so Babble says that this was one of the instances that Reb Chia said, Ainli aleim tshuva. This was one of the times that I didn't have a response. I didn't have a response to Reb Yossi's Kavachomer. Heishiv Rab Elazar HaKaper Bribi Tshuva. I didn't have a response, but Rab Elazar HaKaper, the great, the Bribi, the Gadol Ador, he had a response. Okay, let's just take stock where we are at this moment. Where we are at the moment is Rav Eina said that Kisui Adam would be doche Shabbos. Rabbah quoted a brisa where Rabbi Yossi says, don't check the koi on Yom Tov, because then you would have to do, because then there's a question about Kisui Adam, and if you did check the koi on Yom Tov, don't do Kisui Adam. The Safek Kisui Adam would not be doche Yom Tov, and he brought a Kavachomer from Mila, that Vadai Mila is doche even Shabbos, but Safek Mila is not doche Yom Tov. So therefore, when it comes to Vadai Kisui Adam, which is not doche Shabbos, certainly it is not doche Yom Tov. So Rabbah wants to say from Rabbi Yossi's Kavachomer that we see that Vadai Kisui Adam is not doche Shabbos. Now says the Gemara, Katani Mias Kisui she'ein vado doche Shabbos, my vado the Kisui de lo doche Shabbos. So when Rabbi Yossi says that Vadai Kisui Adam is not doche Shabbos, what is he referring to? Lava shoichet lechoyle b'Shabbos? Is it not talking about Rav Eina's case? When you shoichet, when you shech a chaya on Shabbos for a chole sheyesh bo sakana, and we're saying that, so now there's certainly a chiyuv of Kisui Adam. We're saying that Vada Kisui Adam is not going to be doche Shabbos. Why is Rav Eina saying that it is doche Shabbos? V'dilma de'ovar v'shachat. But maybe what Vada Kisui Adam is talking about, that what if a person was not supposed to be shechting on Shabbos, there was no cholas sheish bo sakana, he just shechted an animal on Shabbos. And now there's a chiyuv, right? He shechted a chaya on Shabbos, now there's a chiyuv of Kisui Adam. Now what? Maybe it's talking about in that case, the Kisui Adam would not be doche Shabbos. Maybe in the case of the cholas sheish bo sakana, it would be doche Shabbos. No, can't be, because dumya de mila, because we're comparing in the Kavachomer Kisui Adam to mila. Ma mila bershus, just like there's a mitzvah to do mila. So af Kisui nami bershus, we're also talking about Kisui Adam in a scenario that was permitted. We're not talking about where a person was mechal Shabbos. We're talking about where there was a chole sheyesh lo sakana. So that is the question that Rabbah posed against Rav Eina. He really quite sharply posed this question to Rav Eina, even suggesting that we should rip his tongue out, if I understood correctly. And yeah, so Rav Eina had said that Kisui Adam would be doche Shabbos. Rabbah brought a raya from Rabbi Yossi that Vada Kisui Adam is not doche Shabbos. Now we are going to continue and have another look at the rebuttals that we saw. We saw a rebuttal from Tekiyah Shofar on Shabbos, and another rebuttal based on questioning the premise of the Kavachomer. So Amrulo, right? So they had rebutted Rabbah, and they said, well, really, I guess they asked a question on Rabbi Yossi's Kavachomer. Tekiyah Shofar begvulin tochiach. What about Tekiyah Shofar outside of the Beis Hamikdash? She'ein vada doche Shabbos v'sfeka doche Yom Tov. That vadai is not doche Shabbos and safek is doche Yom Tov. My sfeka. What is this suffix? This is a little bit tricky. Maybe the suffix we're talking about is it's a sfeka de yom. We're not sure if it's Yom Tiv or maybe it's a weekday. Hashtavada Yom Tiv dachya suffix Yom Tiv suffix chol mibaya. Nu, what's going on? So the Gemara suggests that maybe. I had said that the suffix is that vada is talking about a man, that a man doesn't blow the shofar even on Shabbos, and a tumtum, an androgynous, can blow shofar on Yom Tiv. So it's talking about a vadai man or a suffix man. For now, we're entertaining. Maybe it's talking about Sveika de Yoma. And it's saying that when it's, without getting into too much, it's a little bit of a tricky concept, though, right? Why there are 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. Let's just say quickly, right? Let's say, because they used to determine the new month based on actually seeing the moon, right? So it would come the 30th day of Elul, and it was a big question: is today the 30th day of Elul, or is it the first day of Tishrei? Is it Rosh Hashanah, right? So let's say it could be talking about that, meaning, so it comes day 30, and you're looking, you're waiting. Is somebody going to come and say that they saw the new moon? And it turns out that so that day is kind of a suffix. Maybe it's Rosh Hashanah, maybe it's not. Let's say it turns out that nobody came that day, so the next day is definitely Rosh Hashanah, right? So let's say the first day is a Friday, and the second day, right, nobody came on the first day, and now it's the second day, it's definitely Rosh Hashanah, but it's Shabbos. So maybe what we're saying is that, when Rosh Hashanah is for sure, when it's definitely Rosh Hashanah, and it's Shabbos, we're saying you don't blow the shofar. And when we're saying if, it's a suffix Rosh Hashanah, right? So let's say that Friday, which was a suffix, maybe today is going to end up being Rosh Hashanah. Maybe somebody's going to come and say they saw a new moon. Maybe it is Rosh Hashanah, but maybe it's a weekday. And we're saying that it is right, that you would blow shofar that Friday when it's a suffix. Maybe it's Rosh Hashanah, maybe it's not. The thing is that there is another example that we're missing, right? We had talked about when it's definitely Rosh Hashanah and it's Shabbos. We had talked about when it's maybe Rosh Hashanah, maybe it's a weekday and it's not Shabbos. But there's another example of what if day 30 of Elul was on a Shabbos, and now it's maybe no. Let's say that the 30th, exactly. So let's say that the 30th day of Elul was on a Shabbos and nobody came to testify about the new moon. So now Sunday is definitely Rosh Hashanah. So when definitely Rosh Hashanah falls out on a weekday, so then you would blow the shofar. So we basically have three scenarios, right? We have when it's definitely Rosh Hashanah and it's Shabbos, you don't blow the shofar. When it's definitely Rosh Hashanah and it's not Shabbos, you do blow the shofar, right? When it's definitely Rosh Hashanah and it's Shabbos, you don't blow the shofar. When it's definitely Rosh Hashanah and it's not Shabbos, you do blow the shofar. When it's unclear if it's Rosh Hashanah and it's not Shabbos, you also blow the shofar. So what the Gemara is asking, if this is what we're talking about, so we're saying that when it's definitely Rosh Hashanah and it's Shabbos, you don't blow the shofar, but then it says when it's maybe Rosh Hashanah, maybe it's not, you do blow the shofar when it's not Shabbos. But there's another cases when it's definitely Rosh Hashanah, so it's definitely Yom Tov, and it's not Shabbos, you blow the shofar. So then certainly when it might not even be Rosh Hashanah, you would blow the shofar. It was very technical, this question, but essentially we're rejecting it, right? So meaning again, my sfeika, what's a suffix? Ilem a suffix chol, suffix yom tiv. If we're saying that when shofar is doche a suffix, that suffix, you would blow the shofar. If it's talking about when maybe it's Yom Tiv, maybe it's not, and it's not Shabbos, it's a weekday, maybe it's Yom Tiv, maybe it's not. Well, hashta vaday Yom Tiv dachyo. Well, if it's a weekday and it's definitely Rosh Hashanah, you would blow shofar. Suffix Yom Tiv, suffix chol mibaya. If it's possible that today might not even be Yom Tiv bichlal, maybe it's just a weekday, of course you'd be able to blow it. So that isn't what we're talking about, because it wouldn't make sense to talk about the Sveika de Yoma, because anyways, fine. Suffix ish, suffix isha. Rather, it's talking about suffix ish, suffix isha, that a man who has a chiyuv, mitzvahs eseh shezman groma, to blow shofar. We're saying that when it's vadai, you have a man who has a chiyuv, and yet it is not doche Shabbos, and yet when you have an androgynos who is maybe chayiv, maybe it's not, maybe it's a man, maybe it's a woman, maybe it's chayiv, maybe it's not, it is doche Yom Tiv. So the question that was asked against Rabbi Yossi's Kava Chomer was like we had explained initially, that Rabbi Yossi's Kava Chomer was, when it comes to Mila, when it's Vadai Mila, it is Docha Shabbos, but when it's Suffolk Mila, it's not Docha anything, it's not even Docha Yom Tiv. So he said, therefore, when it comes to Kisui Adam, which it's Vadai Kisui Adam, is not Docha Shabbos, certainly Suffolk Kisui Adam is not Docha anything, it's not even Docha Yom Tiv. To which we said, but what about this scenario? That a man who's definitely chayiv in shofar is not going to blow shofar on Shabbos, and yet an androgynous who's a suffix, whether he's chayiv in shofar, is in fact doche Yom Tiv, and therefore maybe Kisui Adam should be doche Yom Tiv, even right when it's besuffic. So, and for the Gemara, the reason why that's not a valid question on Rabbi Yossi is because according to Rabbi Yossi, women do blow shofar on Yom Tiv. According to Rabbi Yossi, women do blow shofar on Yom Tiv, so therefore there is really no suffix when it comes to androgynous, when it comes to blowing shofar on Yom Tiv. There is no suffix there. Right? Rabbi Yossi, the time Rabbi Yossi is consistent with his opinion to Omar, that he says, Isha vada'is nami taka, that women do blow shofar on Yom Tiv. The sign that we learned in the Brayso, Bnei Yisrael somchin v'lo bnos Yisrael somchos, that when it comes to smicha, as we learned about in Masechta Menachos, about leaning on one's korban, that right, Bnei Yisrael, the men have a mitzvah of smicha on their korbanos, v'lo bnos Yisrael, women are not obligated to do smicha on their korbanos. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon omrim, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon say, Nashim somchis v'shus, women can do smicha on their korbanos if they would like to, and they could also blow shofar on Yom Tiv if they would like to. So for the fact that you're asking me that, well, an androgynous can blow shofar on Yom Tiv and he's a suffix, guess what? Rabbi Yossi says even Vadai women blow shofar on Yom Tiv as well. So therefore that wasn't a question that we could use to learn anything about suffix Kisui Adam. Ravina says, Ravino l'mayde ka'amir rabbanon, and that which the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Yossi, and they say that women don't blow shofar on Yom Tov and don't do smicha, nami islay pircha maltki shofar shekain vado doche Shabbos bamikdash tomar bekisui delese klal. And even according to the rabbis, right, who would say that women wouldn't blow shofar on Yom Tif. So maybe the question is would be a valid question to them, that men is not doche Shabbos, but this androgynous who's a suffix is doche Yom Tiv. But still, I can make an argument to say I can understand why the suffix, why an androgynous would be doche Yom Tiv when it comes to Tkiyah Shofar, because after all, in the Beis HaMikdash, Tkiyah Shofar is even doche Shabbos in the Beis HaMikdash. So therefore, we have an instance where Tkiyah Shofar can even be doche Shabbos, whereas Kisui Adam is never going to be doche Shabbos. So again, to tell me that Tkiyah Shofar is not doche Shabbos, but suffix is doche Yom Tiv, it's not really a good kavachomer, because by Tkiyah Shofar it actually is even doche Shabbos when you're in the Beis HaMikdash. There's never an instance where Kisui Adam is going to be doche Shabbos. So again, Va'afira Amar Avinu Ulamai Dika'amir Abanon, and Nami, and even according to how the rabbis learn, that they say that women would not blow shofar on Yom Tiv. Islay Pircha, still, it's not a great question from Rosh Hashanah, because Malitkei Shofar, when it comes to shofar and Rosh Hashanah, Shekin Vado, Docha Shabbos B'Mikdash, that when it's definitely that men would be doche, that we would blow shofar in the Beis HaMikdash even on Shabbos. Whereas there's no instance of Kisui Adam ever being doche. Shabbos Eishav Rabbi Elazar HaKaper Bribi, and Rabbi Elazar HaKaper had responded in saying that the whole kavachomer is faulty because malamila shekain ena noeges belele yom tovim, right? And he says that you can argue that actually Kisui Adam is more stringent than Mila, because Mila is limited in that you don't do Mila on Yom Tiv at night. Belele yom tovim udelo noaga b'shar lele noaga. What? It's only on Yom Tiv night that you don't do Mila? What, any other night of the year you would do Mila? No, rather it's saying that the Kavachomer is faulty because Mila is never done at night, whereas Kisui Adam can be done at night. Therefore, Kisui Adam can actually be considered to be more stringent than Mila, and therefore I can argue that Safek Kisui Adam would be done on Yom Tiv. Therefore, the Kavachomer is faulty. And Amar Reb Abba says, Reb Abba ze'echa ben advarim sham Reb Chia ainli alein tshuve. This is says Reb Abba, this is one of the things that Reb Chia said about him that I don't have a response to Reb Yossi about this. Be'eshiv Reb Elazar HaKaper bribi tshuva, but Reb Elazar HaKaper did have this response to say that the Kavachomer is faulty. Friends, that was the Pei Daled of Masechta Chullin. On Daf Peidal, Daf 84 of Masechta Chullin, we learned about Kisui Adam. For kodashim, we wrapped up that question about how do we know that there's no Kisui Adam for kodashim, and we say that it does not apply at all, whether we're talking about kodashim mizbeach or whether we're talking about kodashim bedek habayis. There is no Kisui Adam by kodashim. We had okay, fine, Beseder. We said Kisui Adam for beheimahs. Ultimately, there we said that there is no Kisui Adam for beheimahs either. That kind of the whole question of blood and water and shar mashkim and the whole zochalin thing, which was an interesting question about hilchos mikvaos. We then had perspectives towards meat consumption. There was first sort of an initial sobering perspective, which was you should really limit and have a sense of scarcity when it comes to meat consumption. We then saw the opinion of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who says, look, it's simply based on what you can afford. If you can afford it, go for it. Have meat every single day. And then we saw the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Nachman that, look, afford it, can't afford it, take out a loan. We just got to survive, man. And if we need to eat meat, we got to get our hands on meat. And finally, we talked about Kisui Adam on Shabbos. Rav Eina says it is Doche Shabbos, and Rabbah says that Kisui Adam is not going to be Doche Shabbos. We got into that whole Kavachomer with Mila, with Kisui Adam, with Rosh Hashanah and Tkiyah Shofar. Chevre, that was the Peidal, the 84 of Masechta Chullin.